From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome, my name is Ryan Moore. I'm a specialist in the Geography and Map Division. And today's event is sponsored by the Philip Lee Phillips Map Society of the Library of Congress. The Map Society was established in 1995 to enhance and promote the collections of the Geography and Map Division. Thank you. The Society is free to join, but donations are greatly appreciated. Donations are used to help purchase rare maps, sponsor publications, and lectures like today's event. In May, we're going to have an event on the 13th here at the Library of Congress, 300 Years of Mapping Cuba by Professor Perez Hernandez, who lived in Cuba, and he has lectured at places such as Harvard on the topic of Cuban history and Cuban architecture. It should be a very interesting event. Presently, the Society has published its latest journal, known as the Occasional Papers. They're free to pick up in the back. It looks like this, if you can see through all the bright lights. It's by Louis Divorcey. It's on the history of the Gulf Stream. And the thesis of this work is that Benjamin Franklin was credited too hastily with discovering the Gulf Stream, and there was another scientist who actually preceded him in the discovery of that. Very interesting work. Please pick one up. It's in the back. So before we begin with talking about crowdsourced mapping, Curtis and I had a little conversation, and we wanted to establish some historical and cultural context for this event. Why is it relevant to crowdsource North Korea? Why should that happen? What is important about that practice? So what I want to do is highlight a few things concerning the history and culture of the Korean Peninsula and North Korea. So, pre-modern Korea had isolationist policies, often referred to as the Hermit Kingdom. And that phrase actually has been attached to North Korea today. The peninsula itself was a singular entity until the end of World War II. The Japanese, through establishing treaties, a protectorate, and then formally annexing Korea from 1910 to 1945, were present on the peninsula. At the end of World War II, they were forced out, and we see the beginnings of the Cold War. The Soviet Union occupied the northern half of the country. American forces were stationed in the south. Both sides, and this was roughly along the 38th parallel where the country is divided today. Both sides talked about reunification, but couldn't agree on a system of government. In 1949, the US and the USSR withdraw their forces. North Korea is arming heavily at this time, receiving state-of-the-art technology from the Soviet Union. South Korea is not receiving much in the way of weapons from the United States. In 1950, in June, North Korea launches a blitzkrieg attack into the south and nearly overruns the country. The last line of defense is in Busan. The United Nations, led by the United States and Great Britain, come to the aid of South Korea and turn the situation around. They actually roll back the North Koreans across the 38th parallel. And as they close on the Yalu River, on the Chinese border, People's Republic of China enters the war. And we have then a situation of stalemate along the 38th parallel. Finally, a ceasefire is signed. However, there is no formal peace treaty in place. The countries are technically still at war. And we see here a map by the Central Intelligence Agency of the DMZ created in 1969. This is part of the Geography and Map collection. Koreans call this Hyujunsun ceasefire line, and it stretches across the entire peninsula, 150 miles. And everywhere along this line on both sides are military installations, artillery, tanks. They call it the Demilitarized Zone. Probably the biggest misnomer you can apply to the situation. It is one of the most militarized places on Earth. And if you see the waters to the left, those areas are in dispute between the two countries, and there has been live shooting. People have died in contesting where the northern limit is of those waters, where the southern limit is of those waters, who has a right to be there. I would like to touch a little bit about North Korean geography and place names. The North Koreans, in sort of everyday common language, refer to themselves as Joseon, referring to the Joseon dynasty. They see South Korea as an extension of their country. They call it Nam Joseon, Nam meaning south. Mind you, South Korea also has their own place names. Common name of Korea, Hanguk, in referring to North Korea as an extension of their country, Pukhan, Puk meaning north. So you would often hear about in Korean news, Nam-Puk relations, so north and south. The capital city of North Korea, Pyongyang. North Korea shares borders with China, Russia, and also South Korea along the DMZ. It's a larger country than its neighbor in the south. Neighbor is maybe not the right word, but they're brothers. It's a house divided. The climate of North Korea is hot, humid summers, very cold winters. Most of the land is very mountainous, and I'm going to illustrate that with some maps from the division. Numerous deep, narrow valleys. Most of the people live in valleys on the coastal plains. And despite this massive area of real estate, only some 18% of that land is arable. And you'll see why with this map. This map was drawn in 1944 by a cartographer named Richard Eads Harrison. He worked for Fortune magazine, Time Life magazine. He came to popularity because he presented cartography from a different perspective. He said, why do we always show the map top down? Show the map that highlights the information that you want the viewer to see. So in this map, if you look at the Korean Peninsula, you can see how absolutely mountainous it is, in particular in North Korea. And then you see the coastal plains where Pyongyang sits. And that's where the farming, the breadbasket of North Korea lies. Important to understanding some of the psychology and thinking of North Korea, as well as appreciating that of South Korea, was the Japanese occupation. They call it the Ilje Shide, the time of the Japanese Empire. Here we have a map of Pyongyang made by the Japanese in 1921. And as you can see, the name Pyongyang does not appear on the map. This is the idea of cultural erasure, colonialism, where the Japanese have appropriated the place and the name of the place. And in the pictures that ring this map, it's a tourist map, by the way, in the bottom corner, you see a Mitsubishi factory. The Japanese are highlighting that we've modernized the city. We are bringing industry to this peninsula. And as you look through the pictures, you see Buddhist temple, an old Korean ship. So they're saying, well, this is the old way, and we're the new way, and we're in harmony with all these lovely flowers ringing, winding through the photographs. And there is resentment in North Korea and South Korea to this day about this time period. This is a map made by the North Koreans themselves, and I chose it precisely because it has a sort of the map of the city ringed by illustrations. This was created for the 13th International Youth Festival held in 1989. This map was actually produced a year before that in preparation. The North Korean government spared no expense, spending a fourth of their budget, millions of dollars, to put on a big international show. And we see in the top left corner there, they're highlighting their strength as a nation, their Juche Tower, something I'll talk about a little bit later. And in the lower right-hand corner, their metro system, which they tout as one of the best in the world. And anyone who visits Pyongyang, and I have not, they take them to these metro centers that are very ornate stations with murals on the walls, and they're very ornately decorated. And this map as well, like the other, is available to view and be researched here at the Library of Congress. The North Korean government is a hereditary dictatorship supported by a single party. The Kim family, the Kim dynasty, has absolute power. These titles here in quotes, these are things required of the North Korean people to say when they reference one of these leaders. Is an extreme insult and probably trouble with the government to address one of these leaders without the title. The eternal president, the eternal general, the marshal. Incidentally, Kim Il-sung was a partisan fighter against the Japanese, known for extreme brutality in his tactics against the Japanese. And the Japanese themselves were a very fierce opponent in war. And he idolized Joseph Stalin in many ways and thought to model North Korea off the Soviet Union, but with his own personal spin. And that's what we're talking about here. Juche, this concept of self-reliance. This ideology is very hard to explain. What I'm telling you here is a very distilled, simplified version, but it's a mixture of communism, nationalism, and Confucianism. The leadership holds a place that's nearly religious in the country. And they are governing 24.7 million people. In the South, 48.9 million people. They have a greater area in the north, smaller population. They tout the fact that they provide health care, education, housing, food, etc. for their population, with a caveat. The quality of life depends on a person's loyalty ranking. North Korea begins a file on anyone over the age of 17. You're classified as loyal to the regime, wavering to the regime, or on the outs with the regime. And if you're on the outs with the regime, almost 3 generations it takes to be rehabilitated, to be brought back into the fold. So if someone commits an offense, they, their children, and their children's children are ostracized. And this is a political caste system known as Sungun, meaning constituents. And as we know from many defectors, North Korea, there is a limited civil liberties, state-controlled press, and internet. There's restrictions on travel to and from North Korea. Our guest, Mr. Melvin, he can't visit North Korea, as you can imagine. He's revealing too much information about them. A great tragedy that's happening in North Korea is chronic shortages of food, energy, and medicine. And this coincides with the end of the Soviet Union, who were bankrolling the North Koreans in many ways, like they were bankrolling the Cubans and the East Germans and all these other countries. This cash flow has stopped. And the North Korean priorities, which I'll get to in a minute, are military, not feeding their people. And so they're relying on foreign aid, and it has gone back and forth where the United Nations, the United States, South Korea is sending food and medicine to them. And they're turning around and they're still arming themselves. And that has to do with this second ideology of North Korea. Sungun, army first. Sun from the Chinese character, primary first. Gun as in Yukgun, army, military. It's like a modern day Sparta. They are the world's 4th largest military. And while they have dated technology, in the right hands, it's very lethal stuff. Most of their equipment would have been considered modern during the Vietnam era. That's the highest level of technology. They have terms in fighters and tanks dating back to the 70s. Because, why does it stop there? Because the Russians are no longer sending them the latest stuff. And this, what we'll get to our last point here before we bring up Mr. Melvin about nuclear weapons. They're spending an outrageously high amount of money on defense. $8.2 billion. They have an active military of 1.1 million people. 10 years of mandatory service in the military. It's an incredibly long period of time to have the young men of your nation be committed to military service instead of developing their minds and developing the economy of the nation. They are preoccupied with training for war. And they are used, incidentally, for pet projects of the regime to build, to act as construction workers, to help in harvest time. And there are special forces, which is numbers around some 200,000 soldiers. And I don't want to say men because women are under arms in North Korea too. It's 15 years of service. It's an incredibly long period of time as well. This contrasts with South Korea, some 655,000 soldiers, and depending on the branch of service, 22 to 24 months. There's 2 different mentalities towards defense and defense preparation, as you can see. The total militarized population of North Korea is an astounding 7.6 million people. And remember, we said there's 24-some million people living in North Korea. Close to a third of their people are under arms. The capital of South Korea, Seoul, is in a precarious position. It is not far, some 30-some miles from the DMZ, and it is in range of North Korean artillery. It's projected that there's some 13,000 artillery pieces in that sector of the DMZ that are ready to shoot should a war begin. And let me tell you, Seoul is a beautiful, massive, sprawling metropolis, and if you have a chance to go there, I encourage you to do so. But like any big city, especially this Seoul is divided by a river, the Kang River. Traffic is a nightmare. And should an emergency happen, it would be absolute pandemonium and panic should the North Koreans start shooting on Seoul. North Korea also has chemical and nuclear weapons. And they are developing a long-range missile, if you've been watching the news, that they are keen on being able to shoot the west coast of the United States. They are pushing an envelope, and it's a game of chess and Russian roulette at the same time. The resolution of that, I don't know, I can't predict, but with the way things are going, it can't continue this way, I'm sure. And this is my last point before we bring up our guest, is that we also have to talk about people when we talk about politics and maps, because that's what this is all about, and how this stuff impacts the lives of everyday people. There's this concept on the Korean Peninsula of Isan Gajok, the separated families, who were divided by the Korean War. The Korean War, as I briefly mentioned earlier, had a lot of push and pull back across the peninsula. Brothers and sisters, husband and wife, families were separated because of this, and they never saw one another again often. We were talking about from the war, civilian deaths, some 5 million people killed, wounded, or missing, and more than half of them are civilians. And it left some 10 million people separated from their families. It's a huge amount of their population that is divided by this experience, and it cuts very deep in their soul. They talk about the wounding or the scarring of the soul, sangcho, and the resentment that follows that, Han. Different Han from Hanguk. Han in Hanguk means Korea. Han here means anger, hate, resentment. The South Korean government stepped up in the 80s to try to reunite people, both in South Korea, those living abroad, and with North Korea. And the sad fact is that with the attempt to reunite families, North and South, they often only given 3 days with people who are at the very end of their life. Go see your sister in North Korea, it's okay, for 3 days. And they haven't seen each other in so long. And there was a very famous song in Korea that symbolizes or typifies the feelings that people have for not seeing one another since childhood, perhaps. Patty Kim is a very famous Korean singer. And she has this lyric here, Isramu moroshinayo. Don't you know this person? You haven't seen them your whole life, and you're looking at somebody. It's very tragic. And it's why this crowdsourcing work is very important. We want to open the doors and know more. And hopefully that can affect positive policy. And so I say here, North Korea, Inaru Molayo. This country, I don't know. None of us know. We're trying to understand better. We're trying to see what is inside, to affect and change things for the better. And with that being said, I would like to bring up our guest, Mr. Melvin. He is a researcher at the U.S. Korea Institute, Johns Hopkins University. He is a contributor to the website 38 North and editor of the blog North Korean Economy Watch. He's been studying and writing about North Korea since 2006. And he actually visited there, as I mentioned, and has been banned for the next point, being a creator of the North Korea Uncovered and DPRK Digital Atlas, which he'll be addressing today. He received his master's degree in economics from George Mason and a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Georgia. Please welcome Mr. Melvin.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out. My name is Curtis Melvin. As was mentioned, I'm a researcher at the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins SAIS. This talk is a little different than the one I normally do. Normally, I'm asked to talk about what satellite imagery shows us about North Korea's changing economic landscape. But today, I'm focusing more on actual mapping issues. So it was fun to put this project together and share some of the kind of nerdy mapping issues that I deal with at home that nobody really gets to address much. I started this project after visiting North Korea in 2004 and 2005. This is me, a younger, skinnier, single version of me in Kim Il-sung Square in Pyongyang. The country's changed tremendously since then, and but anyway, when I visited at this time, I didn't know any Korean, and a lot of map information on the country was very difficult to come by. So I would visit places and not have any idea where I was, and this was one of the first things I tried to address after getting out of the country. The last map we saw of Pyongyang from 1988 for the World Festival of Youth and Students, I had never seen that one before. The first map I got of Pyongyang was the one they gave me when I visited. It was produced in 1997. This tourist map shows a lot of the places that you might visit, or you could have visited at the time, in central Pyongyang. But it's not very engaging. You can't interact with this. The information is limited in scope, and it's not to scale, and it's missing a lot of key important areas that as a visitor you might like to know about. For instance, this area right here is where the Workers' Party headquarters is, and it's not even labeled on there in any way. And so it's very lacking in telling you what you can learn about the city. This is the project I've been working on. It's kind of a mess, admittedly, on purpose, to show how much more information we can collect on North Korea. This is using Google Earth, which is satellite information where I've literally by hand labeled buildings and infrastructure. So this exists on my computer right now, and I'll speak about where it's going in the future, but no detail is too small. We know where the photo studios are. We know where the grocery stores are. We have all of the buildings in the Workers' Party complex labeled. We even know about some tunnels under them. Kim Jong-un's residencies in the complex, shopping centers, other government buildings, schools. The blue line here is the railway system. We also have the tram and trolley lines. So no detail is too small, and we can choose which kinds of data we want to look at to spatially compare them and learn about how they relate to each other through geography. And this is something that's very difficult to do with an actual paper map. And as an aside, the previous map I just showed you, this one from 1997, up until last fall when I went to Seoul, this was the most recent map that I could ever find that the North Koreans made of Pyongyang. And last fall I went to Seoul, and a colleague had been in Pyongyang in 2012 and got this map. This is still the only one I've ever seen, and people who go in and out of North Korea check for this stuff to obtain it for me. And so this one hasn't even been widely circulated, but it's a vast improvement over the old 1997 map. It's kind of hard to tell here, but they've the different parts of the city, the different districts, the guyok. In North Korea, they're called guyok. In South Korea, they're called gu. But they've actually delineated them on this map so you can see the different districts in different colors. And the dong, the blocks, the subunits of the district are more specifically identified. And also some of the new construction projects that have taken place between the 1997 map and the 2012 map up here. But also, again, very limited, and the purpose is not really to tell you much about the city, right? You can't go to Pyongyang and wander around to your favorite noodle restaurant. You're going to go on a pre-approved itinerary, and you're going to eat at the restaurants that your travel company has been approved to take you to. Another interesting aside from that map is on the flip side, on the back of it, it's the only North Korean map I've seen that shows the new borders of Pyongyang. Sometime before 2012, Pyongyang was shrunk, and this area of Sunho-ri in the county of Sangwon and Jonghwa, which were previously part of Pyongyang, were removed and made part of neighboring North Hwanghae province. And I was able to verify this using data published for the last Supreme People's Assembly election. But this is the first map I had seen that actually showed it, that was produced in North Korea. So I've been working on two kinds of mapping projects with North Korea, an administrative mapping and an infrastructure mapping. One thing that was frustrating for me is if you look at, I learned Korean from watching North Korean television, and in North Korean sources, that's how I came into Korean. I never really learned much about South Korea ever, but when South Koreans publish North Korean mapping data, they use South Korean spellings, which in some cases are different. So, for instance, in North Korea, they have Yongbyon province, which they spell with, anyway, I'll spare you. They spell it differently than the South Koreans. And in Razon City, a special economic zone in the northeast, the North Koreans spell that differently in Korean and English. But if you look at Google, for instance, they use only the South Korean spelling. Also, if you look at gazetteer data, gazetteer data hurts my eyes. It has not much in common with North Korean sources at all. And so, for instance, if I was interviewing a North Korean defector about where they were from, and I showed this person the gazetteer data, they wouldn't recognize the names, particularly of the small villages. Those have all changed, I think, since that data was compiled. And so everything that I've done on the administrative side is entirely from North Korean sources. Several published atlases that came out of North Korea, including software, atlas software, and an encyclopedia that someone got in Pyongyang and gave to me. And those have maps purely published in North Korea and only in Korean. I also use the North Korean standard for romanizing the names so that if you wanted to search the North Korean media for those names, you would find it. And if you search for North Korean places using South Korean romanization, you won't find anything because generally they spell things, they use a different standard for translating into English. The second project has been infrastructure mapping. This has been a labor of love, but it has been a labor. I have a very loving wife who tolerates me doing this, but no detail is too small. We're interested in every aspect of the geography that can be identified on maps and satellite imagery, and I work on this every day. And anyway, there's the list of things, just a sampling of things. But literally, if I made a column of the different kinds of places we've identified, I mean, it would probably go from the ceiling to the floor in this room. And this is a simple visualization of the administrative mapping that's on Google Earth. We've also published it in other places, but this is just to give you a sampling. So this is Nampo City here in yellow, and this is South Pyongyang province in blue to the north. This is the reduced area of Pyongyang in green. It's updated. And then Pyongyang is broken down into the different guyok. And then in here where I know the borders of the Dong, I've done so, and then some of the other villages farther out here. And again, all from North Korean sources, at least 4 of them, sometimes 5 or 6. And then to give you a sampling of the kind of infrastructure we're doing, I've been working on the electricity grid for years. So you can, that's what these green lines are. We can literally trace like which facilities get their electricity from which power plants, or don't in many cases. This is just an example where I traced the power line from one of the power plants to Kim Jong-un's leadership, it was Kim Jong-il at the time's leadership compound in Kangdong. But that's a kind of fun little details you can get when you overlay different data types together. Also, watching the railway network has been fun. North Korea's railway network, until recently, was the primary means of conveyance for getting around the country. The road system was supplemental. So watching changes to the railway network is always interesting. They haven't made any huge changes recently except to abandon several projects that probably weren't economically viable, but they've also done some fun things like building special railway lines for Kim Jong-il in his last days, and linking up new mines, mostly for exporting raw materials. This is the road network. Again, I've drawn all this out by hand on the satellite imagery, and it takes a long time. I have the roads split up based on whether level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 roads and main road construction projects. But we keep track of all these changes as new satellite imagery comes out. The future of the project here, so everything I've shown you is basically in a KMZ file on my computer. What we've done is well, with the administrative data, we've published it as the 38 North Digital Atlas that's on our webpage, 38north.org. And then the infrastructure mapping, we're trying to move to a web-based system so that researchers can use it more easily. And it's such an enormous and complex file, it's taking a long time to get this done. But the end goal is to build a web-based platform where everybody can access this data, and to have a team of people who are constantly monitoring our various sources for updates of that information, and so that it can always be updated and made available to the public. Why is this important? Well, by combining satellite imagery with the largest non-classified database, we can more easily monitor changes across the country and get a better sense of what's happening there, and communicate these findings to various North Korea stakeholders. So, information sources. This is a lot of research and verification. I lean very heavily on North Korea's official, and they're helpful and they each have their own drawbacks. So official publications, North Korean television, KCTV. Naenara is a North Korean web portal that's updated every day. Uri Minjokiri is a North Korean organization that targets content to overseas Koreans. And Chosun Simbo is run by North Koreans who are loyal to North Korea who live in Japan. Any books and software that the North Koreans publish, the Library of Congress has a tremendous collection of these items, as does the Seoul National Library in South Korea, although the Library of Congress ones are easier to access. The drawbacks for these official publications, you get a wealth of information. You probably get the most timely information. If a new factory has been built or if something has changed names, you're most likely only going to find out about it through official publications. But these only cover places that are that the North Korean government wants to highlight. So if you're interested in developments at a military site or a prison camp, they're never going to be updated on the North Korean official publications. You can only get information about that from satellite imagery or from interviewing defectors. Declassified documents are really helpful. The intelligence community has been researching a lot of places in North Korea for decades. You can get declassified documents on North Korea up till the 1980s, I think. I haven't seen anything from the 90s yet. And these are really helpful. They generally have maps and some old satellite images in them. They have a lot of coordinates, which still work on if you wanted to copy those coordinates into Google Earth. The problem with declassified documents is, in this case, you're getting them, they're very old. So the 1980s is a long time ago in North Korea. Even North Korea has changed significantly since then. They're also sort of targets, things that we might be interested in blowing up one day. So if you're interested in a new paper factory or fishing station, it's probably not going to be in them. The other thing that's frustrating is the declassified documents generally refer to the places they've identified by what the intelligence community calls them, or what they used to be called, not what the North Koreans actually call them. And so there are a number of times I found out where I would identify a factory from a North Korean source and ascribe a name to it, and then I would see a name that was unfamiliar in a declassified document, and I would punch in the coordinates and find out that they were the same thing. It's just that the intelligence community had a different name for this place than the North Koreans did. And so, as far as I know, I'm the only one who's in the business of putting this data together. Defector interviews is another source of information. I interviewed a North Korean defector yesterday. Defector interviews can be really rewarding and really frustrating. There's about a little over 27,000 North Koreans who have entered South Korea now. The numbers have been going down since Kim Jong-un came to office, and the South Korean government hasn't published the 2015 number as far as I'm aware, but most North Korean defectors come from the northern provinces along the Chinese border, from small villages. Sometimes they're from the provincial capital cities, but in general, there's not many, there's just several. Anyway, most North Korean defectors really don't know much more than what's going on in their personal lives. Even if they're from a large city, they have a hard time looking at satellite imagery and rectifying satellites or map with the maps that are in their heads. And a lot of times they just don't know much more than where they lived, where they went to school, where they worked, or where they went shopping. And then you also have additional problems where I've had defectors not tell the truth. They fabricated, one woman I'm thinking of in particular, fabricated entire story of her life in Pyongyang and where she worked and where she lived. And, she picked a well-known factory as her place of employment. And as I asked her specific details about the neighborhood she lived in, about which I already had some data, she confessed and said, if you want to know this kind of information, I have to tell you it from a different town because I don't know it here. And so anyway, that's happened several times. So you have to be really careful when interviewing defectors because sometimes they'll also pass off information of what they think something is instead of what they know it is. And so I have a separate file for defector information that I'm not sure about. That doesn't make it into the actual infrastructure mapping. And but one thing that the defectors have been and this is the case yesterday, the lady didn't know much about the city that I didn't already have. But what she did know that was really helpful was she was able to help on the administrative side. So we have maps of Pyongyang, but some of the smaller cities in North Korea getting the names of the dong, the local blocks, is really hard to come by in detailed maps. And she was able to say, like, this neighborhood is called this, and this neighborhood is called this. And as far as I'm aware, that's not published anywhere. I mean, North Koreans don't even see that kind of data growing up there. It might exist somewhere in South Korea, but I've never come across it. DPRK visitors and stakeholders, so aid workers, business ventures, tourists, diplomats. Surprisingly, tourists have been really helpful. Some are pretty daring and they take pictures of stuff they don't even know what it is, and I can go through it and match it up with the satellite imagery and find out some neat shop or some new restaurant that's gone up. The aid workers and business people and people from the diplomatic community, those contacts take a little more work to develop because obviously people are shy about letting information out or jeopardizing their work there. I also wanted to point out that I'm not sure what the definition of crowdsourcing is, but if it's getting tips from strangers, that's not what I've done. Nearly every piece of data that I've put in this project has a citation. You can visually see where I got the data from and verify it. I even have links to North Korean television in it, so you can see for yourself that the data that I've published matches the North Korean source. This was an example of finding something fun. This is sort of what we go through all the time. But this is a number of years ago. Kim Jong-il, when he was still alive, visited KPA unit number 586, which is also the Reconnaissance Bureau, which is responsible for operations in South Korea. And using the official footage from his visit there, we found the location in Pyongyang. And I'm not saying this is the only Reconnaissance Bureau compound in Pyongyang, but it's obviously one of them. And we matched up the buildings and the monuments with what we saw in the satellite imagery. And I actually didn't find this. One of my colleagues found this. But we can still cite the source for it because it was in North Korean publications. And this one was fun. It is a secret Burmese military delegation visited North Korea in 2009. It wasn't reported in the official media. They went there to go buy some military equipment. Someone from that delegation released their photos, and so I was able to look at these photos and find just about everywhere that they went in North Korea. And this was some place where they went to look at I think it was some anti-aircraft equipment or something, software demonstration. And so I saw a picture of this building, and I was looking all over Pyongyang for it, and then I found this picture, and it looked like it matched the ground level photo. And I was able to task someone in Pyongyang to drive by this and see if that was the building. And so I was able to verify it with someone on the ground. And this was a defector testimony where I used for publication a number of years ago for the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea on Japanese abductees. M. Young-jin was a defector who, they did this hand-drawn map of where the Yodago, the Red Army hijackers, were living in the outskirts of Pyongyang. And when I was given the map, they didn't include the key to it. So this says like map written upside down because they gave me the map with south at the top. And so I was looking around for that. I couldn't find it anywhere. And when I turned it upside down, and then I found the thing. It's very important to put the key in there. But anyway, that was much harder than it should have been. And here, this is the Mirei Scientist Street in Pyongyang. It was just completed. It's sort of maybe the fifth large residential construction project to take place in Pyongyang since 2012, or maybe 2010. And it's on the, anyway, I've already got photos of all of these buildings from the ground. So I'm just waiting to get a new satellite picture, and then I can label what all the shops and restaurants and buildings are along there. And that's using person sources and North Korean sources, because the North Koreans have shown plenty of these places in their official outlets as well. Kim Jong-un visited that blue shop in the middle there. On the administrative side, it's also kind of tricky to combine the data and figure out what the reality is, what the truth is. Every single map that I have of Kaesong that the North Koreans have published looks like this. So Kaesong City, Kaesong is like New York. It's a city. It's comprised of a big area called Kaesong and a small area called Kaesong. So Kaesong City also includes Kaepong County. It did include Panmun County, Kaesong City, and Jangpyeong County. And every single map I have shows this configuration for this area. And I stumbled on a story in the KCNA, which is the outlet that North Korea uses to convey official information to outsiders. And KCNA said that in 2002, Panmun, this is in setting up the Kaesong Industrial Zone, which was just closed a few days ago, that Panmun County had been dissolved and renamed into a ri. It had been downgraded from a town, an oop, to a ri. And the other villages around it had been moved into Kaepong, Kaesong, and Jangpyeong. And so because the KCNA article listed all of the ri, and all of those ri matched the ones I had on the maps, I was able to, I think, accurately plot, although I haven't actually seen this map anywhere from a North Korean source, the new boundaries of Kaesong. And so here, this Pongdong ri is what used to be Panmun town. And now Kaesong comes all the way down to the DMZ. Kapung comes all the way down to the Han River, and these areas here that used to be part of Panmun are now part of Kapung. The Jangpung border came down, and so I just looked for after moving the villages, in North Korea, a lot of the county borders are high landmarks, so mountain ridges and rivers, and also railway tracks and some other things. But anyway, I just used the high landmark between where the villages were supposed to be moved around to figure out where the new borders are between these areas. But I still haven't seen a North Korean map that has this configuration. Another case that was frustrating is in Gangwon province. North Korea has a Gangwon province. I didn't realize until recently that South Korea also has a Gangwon province, but it was split in two. And North Korea has changed a lot of the borders in Gangwon province because of large dam projects. But anyway, this is Pyeonggang County. This right here is the DMZ. A little minor note is that all of the North Korean maps show the county borders as if the DMZ wasn't there. And so they come into the actual zone, and they list villages that maybe used to be there and are still officially there, but if you look at the satellite imagery, there's nothing there. So on my map, what I did was I actually stopped at the DMZ. On the North Korean side, you can see where that is because there's a security infrastructure there. And then I just ignored the villages that were on the North Korean maps that were inside the DMZ. But for the record, the North Koreans still claim villages are in there. So I labeled, so you can see the shape of Pyongyang County around here. And I was able to map this out on the satellite imagery using this map published in North Korea in 1997. I have maps like this for every county. It's just a North Korean atlas that was published by the Foreign Language Publishing House in 1997. And this is it here. And then they label the RE on there, and again, you can look at the satellite imagery and confirm that there's actually a village where they say it is. And then in 2012, I got this North Korean encyclopedia set. It's a digital encyclopedia. It's not a book that the North Koreans published. And it had maps for all the counties again. And this is Pyongyang County from that map. I don't know when it was published. I think sometime in the early 2000s. But anyway, it was for Pyongyang County. It was different, right? It had added on this section that it took from all the villages' names were the same, but the county border had moved over, and then up here it had been brought down. So then I had to go and redraw all of my. I assumed that this was the most accurate since it was the newest, and was published from North Korea. But I couldn't find anything that the North Koreans had published in KCNA or Rodong Sinmun where they said that they had changed these borders around. All I had was this. But I thought, well, it's the newest one, so I'll accept this as the most accurate. And then the North Koreans launched a large agricultural project here. It's called the Seppo Tableland Project. The Mongolians are helping. They gave like 10,000 heads of cattle for the North Koreans to revive their livestock numbers here. And so the North Koreans have been talking about all the livestock farms they're building in this region, and then they showed all of the counties that they're building in on television, and they used the old county shape. So then I was like, I just changed it. So I went back and switched it to the old one. This old one in here actually matches the one that was on television. And this is actually a giant map, right, that was physically made, and Kim Jong-un has been there to deal with the SEPO tableland construction. So I accept this as, it has the virtue of being the most published map of the county, but I accept it as more accurate as well, even though I have a North Korean source that conflicts with it. And here's another kind of problem that I've had to face on the administrative side. This is Haesan City. This is how the North Koreans spell Yongbyon province. The South Koreans don't spell it that way. But this is Haesan City. This is the 1997 map that I used to map it out. So this circle right here, this is a village. And South Koreans don't call them Ri, they call them Ni, usually. But anyway, they forgot to put the name of this village here. I found it from a different source. And then here's Jangan-ri, Uncheong-ri, and Rojong-ri. And, and this is a 2005 satellite image of these villages. I went and verified. They were all there. Not to give anything away, but they were in the process of being torn down, actually, of being erased from the map because they were building a dam there. And so this is what it looks like in 2012. These villages have all been flooded out. And you can see on the satellite imagery where the villages have been moved to other, they've rebuilt them in surrounding areas, but I didn't know which one was which. And you guys can't understand how frustrating that is. But eventually, North Korea, under Kim Jong-un, has announced nearly a little over 20 special economic zones. SEZ special economic zone, and they were going to put one in Haesan. And they gave on television, they showed this map and gave the location of the SEZ as one of these peninsulas on this reservoir. But they showed the names of where they moved the villages. And so they haven't published any maps, certainly that I'm aware of, that have this updated information. I was only able to find it just by watching North Korean television every day. You guys should pay me for that. So anyway, now I have an updated map of Haesan City, and it has the reservoir here, and it has the villages in the proper place around the outskirts of it. And so that's it. Thank you.
So this is a time for questions. If you have a question, if you could just raise your hand and stand up and speak loudly so everyone can hear your question. And if you're in the back and you can't hear the question, I'll be happy to repeat it and allow Mr. Melvin to jump in and answer. Up front here, please.
John Cho with the Voice of America. Mr. Melvin, you said your end goal is to produce a web-based platform. When do you expect that could be launched?
I'm not going to give you a date on that because I've already been wrong so many times. I'm going home today to work on it, but I don't know when it'll be finished. Hopefully in the next year. Do you want to call him? Okay.
You talked about the defectors. Defectors, when they make it in South Korea, are getting some money and some support, and some of that might lead to, whether it's book deals or things that are not correct information. We have to go through all that in order to verify. But my question is, Pyongyang is considered, I guess, the center city. The elite can go there. Most people on the outside cannot go there, as I understand it. And the people that you could talk to, the defectors, how far could they geographically move into different territories and be able to
Yeah, almost. I've met a handful of defectors from Pyongyang, not many. Less than 10, actually. Maybe about 10. But most North Koreans know where they were from. and the route they took to get out, and that's it. And where they're from, they really don't know much farther than literally like their village. So, and when I ask questions like, where's the central bank branch? I don't know. Where's the People's Committee? I don't know. You know, so it's a lot of work to get a small amount of information out of them.
Who in the States is helping you with the project? Like, are they colleagues at universities here in the Virginia, D.C. area, or around the country? And then who is helping you with maps from North Korea? Like, do you have friends who live there, and how are they able to pass it?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for too long, since let's say 2006. I've been actively working on this, so it's coming up on 10 years. I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of people who have been in and out of North Korea or have the opportunity to go in and out a lot of times. And so if there's a book out that I want, I can ask someone to get it, or someone might be thoughtful enough to get it for me. But in terms of permanent staff who want to help me, U.S. Korea Institute gives me interns to work on this project. They help with a lot of translation work. There's a learning curve on it because they're usually South Korean and they've never seen any North Korean sources, and the language is sometimes a barrier, and there's North Korean words and they don't know anything about North Korean geography. But it takes time to develop trust in people. Like, I have information that I know about, but I want to get another source for it before I add it to the collection of data, and that's just to be a good person, in my opinion. I don't want to name names or anything. So, yep.
I'm from Voice of America Korea Department. What is the expected usage of this map when you actually complete it? Have any foreign government or U.S. government or intelligence asked for your map to use in their missions?
No. No intelligence agency has ever asked for my mapping information. The use is mostly for academic and media use and policymakers. There's a tremendous amount of ignorance of North Korean geography. I mean, I don't mean that like people are ignorant because they don't know. I mean, there's not really a big reason for most people to know. But as North Korea is certainly a country that's in the news a lot and a country of concern, I prefer to give good information on North Korea, and I think this is a valuable platform for doing that.
Sir?
What is your observation of the economic development of North Korea based on what you're seeing? Is it a progressing economic development, either in manufacturing or agriculture or both?
Yeah, you know, it's a big mystery. I mean, North Korea has never, they stopped publishing net material product tables in the 1960s. Net material product tables were what we used from other communist countries to estimate the size of their GDP. There's an entire literature on this, and I'll spare you the complications, but it's a lot of art and science. It's a rigorous attempt, but it's not perfect to establish a value for official output in North Korea. But now there's a black market in North Korea, and there's not even the government hasn't published a budget since 2001, and they only publish percent increases and decreases in spending on selected items each year. It's mostly an advertising or signaling device. It's not anything you can use to rigorously estimate the official budget. So really, the big good news, I guess, economically from North Korea is that they've stopped the inflation that began after the 2009 currency revaluation. We don't really know how they've stopped this inflation, but the black market exchange rate has been relatively stable for the won since 2012. The number of markets that exist in the country have increased a little bit under Kim Jong-un, but he's shown no propensity, like his father, to clamp down on market activity or to restrict free prices of commodities in those markets. And he still hasn't visited one. We still haven't seen any official North Korean person involved in economic matters visit an official marketplace. But we can see on the satellite imagery that they're continuing to grow and expand. So that's a positive development. The South Korean Bank of Korea publishes an annual estimate of the North Korean economy, and they've shown basically a plus or minus 1% each year since Kim Jong-un took office. A lot of people, myself included, think that the actual growth rate, at least in Pyongyang, has been substantially higher than that, just based on qualitative assessments on the amounts of consumer goods that are available to North Koreans today compared to, say, 10 years ago. You cannot defend that position with any standard econometric tools, because the data is not available to do that. We're really trying to triangulate official economic news, satellite information, information from defectors, information that creeps across the border, to put together a coherent picture of what's happening in specific industries, and that's really the best we can do.
We have time for one more, sir, right here in the front. Yes, sir.
Yeah, is the Digital Atlas available online?
Yeah, the administrative information is already available. It's from 2012, so it's probably the most recent version is probably like maybe 7 or 8% different, but it's largely available at 38north.org.
And it's
just
downloadable?
No, it's just a web platform. Yeah, you can.
And it have all those the names.
Yeah, in English and Korean. You can search it in English and Korean.
I guess you're familiar with Esri? GIS?
Yes. Yeah.
They're at a conference in town this way. I was there this morning, and they showed a slide of North Korea with a bunch of different places. I was wondering if they, scraped the internet and got.
I have no idea. Excuse me. Most of the, for the ArcGIS, I'm really not a computer guy, but the ArcGIS database set is gazetteer data, and I don't like it. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.